Ted Cruz goes absolutely nuclear on all the Democrats in Congress. You guys are not going to want to miss this.
237 years of our nation's history. I don't know that there has been a more shameful day in the United States Senate than today. What we just witnessed was a travesty. It was a travesty to the United States Constitution, and it was a travesty to the American people. And it's important to understand why the Democrats did what they did. We're here on the Senate floor right now, but I want the record to reflect I'm going to do a very accurate count of the number of Democrats who are with us. That would be 0, other than the presiding officer, and somebody has to preside. Not a single Democrat senator chose to come to this floor and listen to one word of evidence. When it comes to the Constitution, the Democrats concluded that Joe Biden and Alejandro Mayorkas defying federal law, ignoring the text of the statute, deliberately releasing criminal illegal aliens over and over and over again, that's just hunky-dory. You can't impeach him for that. Every Democrat just voted. By the way, every cabinet member, guess what? You've just been given a blank slate. Ignore the law. When Democrats are in charge of the Senate, the entire cabinet could ignore the law. It is no longer impeachable. In Democrat Wonderland, when a member of the executive branch openly defies the law. By the way, every Democrat just voted that way. They didn't hear one word of argument. The majority leader didn't stand up and say, here's the reason why it's okay. No, he didn't present that argument. They didn't read a brief. Nobody wrote a brief. They didn't care enough to know what Senator Lee just laid out, that the Biden Department of Justice went in front of the U.S. Supreme Court and said if the executive defies the law, the answer is impeachment. The willingness of every Democrat to be blatantly hypocritical. Just last year, the Biden Justice Department said, no, you can't sue in court when we, the Biden administration, defy the law. The answer is impeachment. In like 3-card money, every Senate Democrat said, no, the answer is not impeachment. I don't know what it is. Actually, I do know what it is. There's only one answer left, which is everyone who is unhappy about the open border shows up in November, and to use the phrase, throw the bums out. Because if you're not willing to do your job, is there not one senator a day? You go down to the southern border, you go down to Texas, which the Democrats don't bother to do because they don't care about the people dying. And you see photograph after photograph that Texas farmers and ranchers are finding of dead bodies on their property. Many of my colleagues here have been down there with me, have seen the elderly people the human traffickers have abandoned, have seen the pregnant women the human traffickers have abandoned, have seen the infants and toddlers left to die. The Senate Democrats just told the American people they don't give a damn about the bodies and the people who have died the last 3.5 years, and they don't give a damn about the people that are going to die next week.
I don't care how much the Democrats might hate the Republicans in Congress. You show up every single day because you're not working on behalf of the Republicans or the Democrats. You're working on behalf of the American people. If you're not willing to show up and admit that there is an issue going on in this country and just pretend that no problems exist, then the issue will never be solved. This is childish, and anyone who did not show up should be held accountable.
They don't give a damn about the bodies and the people who have died the last 3.5 years, and they don't give a damn about the people that are going to die next week. Next week, more migrants are going to die. When we brought 19 senators down to the border, we went out on a boat in the Rio Grande. We saw a man floating dead in the water. Senator Lee was there. Senator Kennedy was there. He had died that day. The Democrats just told the American people they don't care. When you go down to the border and you look at the children who've been brutalized, just about all of us here are parents. I will tell you, when you look in the eye of a little girl or a little boy who's been abused by traffickers. And you see it, you see the pain, you see the agony of children trapped in sex trafficking. The Democrats just said they don't care. They won't hear the evidence, they don't care that it's deliberate, and they don't care that it'll happen next week, that it'll happen tomorrow. Tomorrow there will be children brutalized because of the Democrats' open border policies, and not a one of them cares. They don't care about the women who are repeatedly sexually assaulted. Again, when you look in the eyes of these women coming over, it's heartbreaking. And the Democrats just said, we don't care. And they don't care about the more than 100,000 Americans that died last year from drug overdoses. The highest in our nation's history. 70% of that is from Chinese fentanyl coming across our southern border. And the Democrats said, we don't want to hear about it. We're not interested in the Americans dying. You know what they also don't care about? They don't care about the criminals that are being released day after day after day. The Biden administration is releasing murderers and rapists and child molesters, and every week we see another story of somebody being killed, somebody being raped, another child being assaulted by illegal immigrants released by Alejandro Mayorkas and Joe Biden. How shocking is it that there wasn't one Democrat who says, you know, massive human suffering matters? We ought to hear the evidence. How shocking is it that there wasn't one Democrat? One! There are 51 of them on that side. Not a single one could screw up the courage to say, let's do our job, let's hear the evidence. How shocking is it that not a Democrat cares about the terrorists who are streaming across our southern border? The nation of Iran has called for jihad against America. Hamas has called for jihad against America. Hezbollah has called for jihad against America. And Joe Biden and the Democrats have put out a red carpet and said, if you want to murder Americans, come across our southern border, and we, the Democrats, will welcome you. Like many of us on this floor, I was in Washington, D.C. on September 11th, 2001. I remember the horror. I lost a good friend, Barbara Olson, who was in the plane that crashed into the Pentagon. I remember the smell of smoke and sulfur and burning. I remember the agony, and I remember the national unity that came after 9/11. As Democrats and Republicans came together, I don't know that I've ever been more proud of a president than when President George W. Bush stood on a pile of rubble with a bullhorn, talking to firefighters and New Yorkers, and one of the men in the crowd called out and said, "We can't hear you," and he responded, "Well, I can hear you, and soon the whole world is going to hear you as well." We were as one. Today, not a single Democrat was able to mount up the courage to tell the majority leader, you know what, I don't want another 9/11 to happen. The House impeached Alejandro Mayorkas for, among other things, releasing terrorist after terrorist after terrorist. We ought to hear the evidence. I believe today we have a greater risk of a major terrorist attack on U.S. soil than at any point since September 11th. And every Democrat just told the American people it doesn't matter to them to hear the evidence. I appreciate my Republican colleagues who are here, who are willing to hear the evidence, willing to engage, willing to stand up and defend the American people.
The more you think about this, the worse it gets. Not one single Democrat came. Do you know how much of an echo chamber that you have to be surrounded in? The statistical anomaly that is just goes to show how warped a lot of people's brains are in Congress, because they cannot think past party lines. We don't just draw a line in the sand and refuse to go past it just because a Republican might agree with you. I don't care if you're the most radical Democrat or conservative Republican. If I agree with you, I'm going to stand right next to you. I don't care the backfire that will ensue. You have to have conviction in what you believe in. You can't just be hypnotized in a trance like the Pied Piper and only do as you are commanded. That's not how our country was founded.
But The Democrats who aren't here, they aren't here because you know who's also not here? If you look up at the gallery, the reporters are all gone. A couple of folks in the back, I hope you all right. But the reporters are absent. That's the Democrats' plan. What is fascinating, we're presenting arguments. Many of us, particularly those of us in judiciary, but many of us have presented those arguments over and over and over again in hearings. Not a Democrat argues on the other side. It's an issue unlike any other issue I know of in politics. Listen, if we're arguing about taxes, as Republicans, we say we should cut taxes. It's good for the American people. And you know what Democrats do? They stand up. We know their talking points. No, tax the rich. Okay, fine. We have a debate. We're talking about just about every issue. The Democrats will argue on the other side. They have their spin. What is fascinating? Where's Dick Durbin, chairman of the Judiciary Committee, standing up saying, no, it's not right that migrants are dying every day. No, it's not right that children are being assaulted every day. No, it's not right that women are being sexually assaulted every day. No, it's not right that they're releasing terrorists every day. They're not there. Not a Democrat is there. Why? Because you cannot defend it. Out to Texas for 100-plus years has been a Democrat region of our state. It is turning red with the speed of a freight locomotive because nobody can see the suffering that is unfolding and defend it. And the Democrats, by their silence and by the complicity of the press corps, they are counting on the press corps to write story. Victory for the Democrats, yay! They got rid of the impeachment trial. That's the headline they want. Understand they don't have a substantive defense. None of them disputes a word we are saying. Not a single Democrat has stood up and said, you know, it's wrong that Laken Riley would still be alive if Joe Biden hadn't let her murderer go. They know it's right. The reason they didn't want a trial is they don't want the American people to hear about it. And it's our obligation to make sure the American people do. Well, let's take a quote you wrote in November 2017, and I found it amusing, the exchange a moment ago with one of the Democratic senators about, some older intemperate statements. I would note, just sitting here, this may be a first in that you have tweeted attacks at multiple members of this committee, including Senator Lee, Senator Cotton, Senator Blackburn, Senator Cornyn, and far from being intemperate statements when you were a teenager. Most of these tweets occurred last year. So in the last 12 months, you have engaged, or the last about 18 months, you have engaged in partisan attacks on multiple members of this committee. But you also wrote in November 2017, quote, in these dark times, I've been fortunate to find tremendous sense of purpose in my work as a civil rights lawyer. But as a colleague of mine asked me over lunch recently, Dale, do you do this because you want to help people or because you hate conservatives? What he was getting at is that anger can, in fact, be a tremendous source of power. For me, righteous indignation can provide a sense of moral clarity and motivate the long hours needed to get the work done. But it's only a short-term burst. It's not sustaining in the long run. Mr. Ho, if you wake up and are Judge Ho, and I recognize that New York is a blue state, but imagine there is someone who considers himself or herself a conservative in the state of New York, who, God forbid, finds themselves in a courtroom where you're wearing a robe. What comfort do you think that litigant would have that you described the hatred of conservatives, the righteous indignation, the anger at conservatives, as a tremendous source of power for you personally? How does that possibly give anyone comfort that you would be a fair and impartial judge?
Thank you, Senator Cruz, for giving me an opportunity to address this. As I mentioned to some other members of the committee, this was a comment that I made in church where I was relaying a joke that someone else had told, the point of which was that kind of temporary sugar rush from being angry at someone, while it can feel powerful in a moment, it's not the kind of thing that is sustaining for a human being in the long run, that at the end of the day, if you want to do good work in the world, it has to come from a different place, a place of love for your fellow person. And that's what I was trying to convey to my fellow congregants at my church.
Well, that's not what you said. And what you said is you described hatred and righteous indignation directed at conservatives.
I don't care if you're a Republican or Democrat, any congressperson who does not do their job and show up without a valid reason needs to be held accountable. I think where a lot of politicians and congresspeople get it twisted, they think they have to act on behalf of themselves. They have to act on who they are representing. They have to give the will of the people. So AOC, Nancy Pelosi, all these people, they might hate Trump with every fiber in their body, but you still have to show up, go through the steps, and actually engage in debate and conversation. It seems that these people have their own set of rules for life. Rules for thee and not for me. If anyone else did this in their own job, they would get fired immediately. You can't just not show up. So fair play to Ted Cruz for absolutely blasting these people, because we cannot let this behavior become the new norm. This needs to be penalized severely. I don't know how they're going to penalize them, but they have to do it somehow. Whether they dock their pay, whether they get suspended for a little while, but this cannot be tolerated at all. That just goes to show what is wrong with these politicians, that they're more focused on other countries than United States citizens themselves. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this down below. How do you think these congressmen and women should be dealt with? And do you think Ted Cruz was justified in his bashings? Let me know. I'd love to hear that. And if you enjoyed, make sure to smash that like, comment, subscribe, and wish you guys nothing but the best. Till next time.